So, namaste everyone. The divine in me bows to the divine in you. I thank you, all of you, for coming to participate in University of Guelph second annual Yoga Speaker Series. And if you have not already, please bring your mat. We are going to do yoga. We are going to practice yoga. Yoga is 99% practice, 1% theory. Okay, so remember that. So bring your mat, please bring your mat. So my name is Lalit Jairath and I'm going to be your host today. I have been working very happily at the University of Guelph for past 25 years. Our speaker today is Professor Dr. Hans Bakker Aka Govinda. So before we start this yoga speaker series, I'm from University of Guelph and I would like to make a land acknowledgement. It's very, very important that I share that with you. The University of Guelph resides in the ancestral and treaty lands of the Eta Vandaron people and the Mississaugas of the Carrot. And we recognize and honor our Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Métis neighbors. The dish with one spoon covenant speaks to our collective responsibility to steward and sustain the land and environment in which we live and work. True to that spirit of land acknowledgement, the theme of this second annual Yoga Speaker Series from University of Guelph, our theme for this speaker series is Yoga for You and the Planet. And our tagline is nurturing the interconnectedness, restoring the balance, and cultivating the well-being. So this Yoga Speaker Series is presented by University of Guelph Yoga and Meditation Collective. So as I say, yoga is 99% practice, so bring your mat. So our yoga practice will be under the guidance of Upinder. Upinder is a certified classical yoga teacher. Upinder began teaching daily classes in June 2020 to support friends and family through the pandemic and has offered a class every day since June 2020, every day since. An engineer by profession, running a tech startup and a mother of 3. Upinder finds that yoga helps her find balance in her busy life. Upinder has a long-standing passion for yoga and mindfulness and has been practicing for the last 10 years. So Upinder, please.
Thank you, Lalit. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Welcome everyone. We'll start by greeting everyone with a namaste, bringing the hands to the heart. We'll start with a lying down posture. Anyone who has difficulty sitting on the mat can sit on the chair comfortably and do all the yoga postures we'll be doing today. So lying down on the mat, dropping very heavy onto the mat, letting gravity control here, bringing our feet about
Upinder, can you turn on your microphone, please?
And finishing the round we're on, let's relax. Wiggling our fingers and our toes a little bit, bringing awareness back to the body. We'll start with Yastikasana, stick pose, bringing the feet together, bringing our hands above us, taking a deep breath in, and stretching out the hands and the feet in opposite directions. Stretching the whole body. Hands are stretching, arms are stretching, shoulders, spine, legs, feet, everything is stretching. And breathing out, relax. One more time, breathing in and stretching. Strong like a strong stick. And breathing out, relax. Bringing our hands to the side. Pavan Muktasana, wind removing pose. Let's take a breath in. Breathing out, bringing one knee in, avoiding the rib cage, bringing the knee as close to the shoulder as we can. And hold here. Breathing in, bringing it back. Breathing out, other side. And hold. Breathing in, relax. Breathing out, both legs come in, hugging the legs, bringing them as close to the body as we can. And breathing in, relax. We'll bring our hands to the sides, palms facing down, bending the knees. Knees go on one side and turning our head to the other side. If you like a deeper stretch, bringing the feet on top of each other. Breathing into the stretch, coming on the side of the body. And switch directions. Breathing into the stretch, coming on the other side of the body this time. And coming back to center. Let's bring the hands back, straightening out the legs. We'll slowly come up to seated position. Coming to Sukhasana. Sitting comfortably on the mat, sit bones are planted on the mat, spine is nice and straight, shoulders are up and back, head and neck is very loose. Hands are comfortably resting on the thighs. We'll turn our head to one side, bringing the ear as close to the shoulder as we can. Noticing the nice stretch coming on the side of the neck and the shoulders. Keep breathing here. And switch directions. Breathing throughout this posture. And relax. Bringing our hands out, we'll bring our hands up and back. And down. And up. And down. And up. And down. Making a fist and making some circles. And reverse direction. And let's shake it out. We'll do some elbow rotations. Breathing in as the elbows go up, breathing out as they go down. And reverse direction. And relax. We'll do some shoulder rotations. Breathing in as the shoulders go up. Breathing out as they go down. And reverse direction. And relax. Let's shake it out. We'll bring our one hand to the side, or if you can, bring the elbow down, stretching the other hand to the side. Breathing here, noticing the nice stretch coming on the side of the body. Shoulders are in one line. And switch directions. One more time, each side. And one last time. And relax. Bringing our legs out. Let's rotate our feet in one direction. And reverse direction. And let's shake it out. Bending the right foot, bringing the foot on the inside of the thigh. Breathing in, hands go up. Looking up, stretching the hands up. Breathing out, bending from the waist up. Hands towards the foot, forehead to the knee. One more time, breathing in, stretching up. Breathing out, forward fold. Breathing in, walking the hands back to a straight back. Bringing the foot on top of the thigh, or if you like, leaving it there, gently pressing down on the knee. Wrapping our hands around the leg, rocking it from side to side like a baby. And relax, bringing the foot back. Other side, bending the other foot to the inside of the thigh. Breathing in, hands go up. Breathing out, bending from the waist up, hands to the foot, forehead to the knee. One more time, breathing in, stretching up. Breathing out, forward fold. Walking our hands back to a straight back, leaving the foot there or bringing it on top of the thigh, gently pushing down. Wrapping our hands around the leg, rocking it from side to side. And bringing the leg back. We'll come back to Sukhasana. We'll do a modification of Ardha Matsyendrasana. Breathing in, bringing our hands up, looking up, extending the hands up. Breathing out, bringing our right hand to the left knee, left hand back on the mat. Breathing in, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, twisting our upper body to the left. Every breath in, stretching up. Every breath out, twisting a little bit more. One more time, breathing in, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, twisting a little bit more. Breathing in, coming back to center, hands go up, stretching up. Breathing out, other side. Breathing in, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, twisting to the right, looking over your right shoulder. Once again, every breath in, stretching up. Every breath out, twisting. One more time, breathing in, stretching up. Breathing out, twisting a little bit more. Breathing in, coming back to center, hands go up. Breathing out, relax. Yoga Mudra, bringing our hands behind our backs, holding one wrist with other fingers behind our backs. Breathing in, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, turning towards one knee, bringing the forehead to the knee. Adjusting the shoulders to be in one line. Breathing in, coming back up, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, other side. Breathing in, coming back up, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, forward fold. Breathing in, coming back up, stretching the spine up. Breathing out, relax. Now we'll do a little pranayama. Anulom Vilom, alternate nose breathing. Sitting comfortably on the mat, keeping the body very relaxed. Shoulders up and back, head and neck in alignment with the spine. We'll bring our middle and index finger on the forehead, closing one nostril with the thumb, breathing through the other. Closing that nostril with the ring finger and breathing out through the opposite nostril. Breathing in through that same nostril and out through the other. We keep alternating the breath, keeping the breath very normal. Body is very relaxed. Mind is calm. Excellent pranayama for calming down the mind. Anytime thoughts start to come by, let them come without pushing back. Let them pass just like the clouds in the sky. Bringing all our awareness to the breath. And breathing out from the left nostril. Let's relax. Taking a few normal breaths here. And we can gently open up our eyes, bringing our hands to the heart. And closing our practice with a namaste. Thanks everyone. Back to you, Lalit.
Thank you, Pindarji. That was a beautiful practice. You bring just stillness and the calmness. That's so beautiful. So now we'll move to our program further, and I will invite Dr. Hans Bakker to please come, and we will share that. And Dr. Hans Bakker, so I will just introduce Dr. Bakker, our speaker today. Hans Bakker was born in Friesland, the Netherlands. He came to the US at the age of 5, but moved to Canada to do a PhD in 1971 and taught sociology at the University of Guelph for 35 years. He has written about Gandhi and about rural sociology. His work on Gandhi and on the Bhagavad Gita, the most perhaps popular book in Indian philosophy, was inspired by his year with the Gandhi Peace Foundation in India in 1979-80. He is a member of the Division on Philosophical and Theoretical Psychology of the American Psychological Association. So, Hanshi, please there. So his talk is about the yoga and the psyche, a yogic perspective on mental well-being. Thank you. Go ahead.
Om Bhurabhavasvaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Yo Jona Prachodayam. In this talk, I want to introduce you to Sam, pronounced Sam. I will talk about it in terms of a imaginary use of the word, a symbolic use of the word, and even an ontologically real use of the word. Some of you may recognize this as coming from the famous psychoanalyst, depth psychologist Lacan. Samadhi. So my deep thanks for the invitation, but I must begin with a caveat. I am merely a beginning student of yoga. It's not a joke to say I've only studied yoga off and on for 50 years. Now, 50 years is a long time, but I'm a slow learner, and yoga is so profound. I learned something just today, this morning. I was looking up the word Sam in Sanskrit. I have kindergarten Sanskrit, and I knew about 30 words that begin with Sam. I had no idea there were 1,344 uses of the sound Sam or San in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a wonderful language, very, very difficult, but certainly worth studying. I encourage anyone who's interested to do a PhD in Sanskrit and go to the Gandhian Institute of Studies in Varanasi, the Gandhian University, and so forth. It will take many lifetimes to become a true yogin. The masculine is yogi, the feminine is yogini, but yogin could be applied to anyone of any gender identity, lesbian, gay, transsexual, queer, whatever, bisexual. Nevertheless, with that caveat, knowing, as I do know, that I'm a very failed vessel, I'm not talking about original sin here. I think Lalit sometimes overestimates me, but maybe he does that to encourage me. So I can, nevertheless, briefly explain a few very basic ideas in about 35 minutes. Samadhi. So I'm using the word Sam because I know sometimes it's really hard to remember words that are foreign words if you've never heard them before. My wife had a nurse visiting us from Nigeria. She's a Yoruba woman from Nigeria, and she mentioned her name. Well, I only got the first syllable. And so I've been referring to her as Ono. Her English name is Lisa, but her Yoruba Nigerian name is Ono something, but I couldn't catch the rest. So this evoked the idea, well, at the end, maybe you'll remember that I talked about Sam. And as I've said, there are 1,344 or more meanings of the prefix or inflex Sam or San. Now, when we talk about yoga, we often don't mention Samkhya, but Samkhya and yoga go together like the horse and carriage. They're so inextricably bound at a philosophical basis that technically we should always talk about Samkhya and yoga when we're talking about the ideas. Now, a key goal of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is Samadhi. A key goal of Buddhism, as many people know, is Buddhi. The reason the Buddha is called Buddhi is because Buddha is because of his Buddhi. It's kind of interesting in English what it reminds us of. But Buddhi is a Sanskrit word that refers to knowledge, wisdom, enlightenment, and it comes from Samkhya philosophy, not from yoga philosophy originally. So here we're talking about Samadhi and Buddhi as the goals, but there are two versions of Samkhya, at least. There's hundreds, but at least two that we should recognize. First, there's the Samkhya philosophy and theology that is so profound that it's very difficult to understand. And I know that Christopher Isherwood never understood it. I'm sorry, Christopher, wherever you are, but he never quite got there. However, we can also think of Samadhi and Buddhi in a more everyday life sense. So this is a little joke photograph of me with a colleague, Lonnie Athens, a wonderful man, but he can be a little bit abrasive sometimes. And we've had a few little encounters. So his daughter took this picture of us fighting. Now, if you look at the picture carefully, we're not really fighting. We had verbal disputes about ideas, which are just fine. Samadhi. Samadhi. Lalit?
Yes. I'm trying to go down.
So the word yoga is often discussed with only an ambiguous meaning. Yoga can mean many things, just like samadhi can mean many things. So we need to disambiguate the word. So for the purpose of this talk, I will define yoga as the disciplined pursuit of truth. Now, the Sanskrit word for truth is sat. Another SA word is not sam, but sat. And this will come out again. So for the purposes of this talk, yoga is defined as the pursuit of truth in a disciplined manner. Now, there are other definitions of yoga, and we can discuss that in the Q&A. Samadhi. Now, the term Buddha is an honorific title, as I mentioned. It's not a word, it's not a name. It's like the word Christ. Christ is not a name. His name is not Jesus Christ. He's the Christ Jesus. Siddhartha Gautama was not named Siddhartha Buddha. He was named Siddhartha Gautama, and then Buddha is an honorific title, just like Mahatma is an honorific title. That was not Gandhi's name, it was his honorific title. Now, we can think of the concept of Buddha in a totally imaginary and symbolic metaphorical way. You may remember the first slide from Lacan. Some of these terms can be totally imaginary, like unicorns. They can be real in the imaginary sense, but not in the ontological sense. However, Buddha can also be real in the ontological sense. And so I believe that Gandhi believed that the concept of Buddhahood, Buddha, Mahatmaship, Christship, being a Mashiach, is not just an honorific title, but it also has reality, ontological reality. Samadhi. Now, Samkhya versus Vedanta and Aufhebung. Samkhya has a dualism between Purusha and Prakriti. And the reason I chose this particular picture, it has to do with the Old Testament. It's a painting by Rembrandt. And so this dualism is also true in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Because in all these religions, we have God, and then we have the rest of the universe. God is separate from the universe. In Vedanta monism, there's only one reality. It's monism. There's only the universe. And Spinoza is well known as an advocate of monism. So is Leibniz and a number of other people. But in the tradition of India from at least 2,500 years ago, it was a Vedanta monism. So the difficulty here is because Samkhya is so closely related to yoga, there's also Vedanta yoga, and those two get confused all the time. The German word Aufhebung is difficult to translate, but it means a lifting up. So I believe that the distinction between dualism and monism is not necessary. I believe it's a dialectic. And I believe when you take the monism as the negation of dualism, you can reach what Hegel called a negation of the negation. If you're losing me on these words, don't worry about it. Those who understand what I'm saying will understand that I'm trying to argue that the alleged differentiation or reified binary between Samkhya and Vedanta does not have to be as significant as many, many scholars have said. but that would require a 400-page book. Anyway, if I lost you on that, don't worry about it. Samadhi. So Vedanta Hinduism is associated with Shankaracharya, Acharya Shankar. And so there is a distinction between Vedanta yoga and classical yoga, often referred to as Samkhya yoga. Now, Shankaracharya was an acharya, and in the last talk I gave, I mentioned that the first time I ever met a real acharya in India, not a fake one, not a fake guy who was just making money out of it, but a real teacher, a very humble man living in very modest circumstances, I was blown away. And then those who have read my little book about Gandhi know that I had the privilege of meeting one of the greatest thinkers and yogis of all time, who was a follower of Gandhi and who carried the torch of the Gandhian movement after Gandhi had died, Vinoba Bhave. And I'm so privileged to have even met the man and to have actually spoken with him and asked him questions. This doesn't make me anything other than just a kindergarten student of Sanskrit and of yoga. Maybe I'm in the first grade in yoga. I hope so. Okay. I have to take a deep breath here. I'm so nervous. I want to express so many ideas, and I hope I'm not losing people. Samadhi. Now, yoga, I believe, can benefit all people on Earth. The approximate number is approximately 7.4 billion now. On this third rock from the star that we call the sun. Now, the sun is just a minor star, and our solar system is a minor solar system in a huge galaxy that has many, many solar systems. So although we call the sun because it's our sun, it is just a star. And our Earth is basically a third rock from the sun. You may remember the TV program. And in essence, it is basically a rock covering molten heat. And so it's a wonder that anything lives on this rock, even bacteria. But we won't go into the theory of evolution. I think yoga can benefit everybody living on this planet. But of course, probably at least 7 billion people have never even heard of yoga. Samadhi. So I have frequently gone to Bali, and some of my understanding is due to my travels in Bali, but I also spent a year in India. Indic civilization is my general label for the civilization of South and Southeast Asia that is open to yoga and Samadhi philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. So my travels in Bali and India have opened my eyes. What I've learned is people have never been to a place where Indic civilization exists, have a lot of stereotypes about both the good and the bad of the civilization. I love the ragas. I really felt a profound meditation in listening to Ravi Shankar. Samadhi. So again, yoga, the word is often discussed with only an ambiguous meaning, and we have to disambiguate the meaning. For the purpose of this talk, it's the disciplined pursuit of truth, Samadhi. So how do we disambiguate this word sat? Well, I was a little bit blown away here. To me, sat is truth, but it also means being in the Samkhya Yoga distinction between Purusha and Prakriti. It means the good, the virtuous, the noble, the worthy, the right, the proper, the best, the excellent, the venerable, the respectable, the wise, the learned, the handsome, the beautiful, the firm, the steady. But for this talk, I'm only talking about sat as truth, because that's one common way in which the word is used. Again, the study of Sanskrit is so amazing, and I recommend it. Even just a year of Sanskrit studies will open up yoga to you. And I had a wonderful experience at Kripalu with an intensive course for almost 2 weeks. Then I took all the audio tapes home, and I studied and I studied. And then O.P. Dwivedi, a professor at the University of Guelph, helped me so much with my book on Gandhi's interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. And he and I joked that since he was only in the first grade with Sanskrit, I was in the first weeks of kindergarten. Samadhi. Now, to avoid people misunderstanding me, when I think of truth, I don't only think of a metaphysical, ontological truth that is based on 3,000 years of thinking. I also believe that truth has a lot to do with what we call science, including sciences of nature and the sciences of the human. So I particularly want to draw attention to the wonderful example of Satyendra Nath Bose. He worked with a well-known thinker named Einstein, but he was Bengali, and that's one reason he didn't obtain a PhD in Europe. But he became a famous professor in India, and in the Indonesian language, we call a professor a guru besar, a big guru. He was a big guru, but not in the theological sense. He was a big guru in natural sciences. His name, Bose, led to the physics concept, quantum physics of a boson. And all you have to do is look up boson, then you'll find out how important his work was. I spent a couple of hours trying to understand it, and I could explain it a little bit, but I think it's better if you look it up yourself. Also, when you try to look up Bose, you quickly get all those advertisements for Bose speakers. And I don't know, maybe somebody can answer the question. Do the Bose speakers have anything to do with someone from India whose name was Bose? It's possible. He's such a handsome man too, and it's such a wonderful notion. Also, notice the beginning of his name, S-A-T, Sat, Satyendra. Okay. Samadhi. So again, Indic civilization, Buddhist Hindu thought. In Bali, there's a lot of celebration of Hanuman, and I've often really enjoyed watching Hanuman dances. A dancer will have a Hanuman mask. I have a couple of Hanuman masks at home from Bali. But also in Bali, Parvati is a very important goddess, as are the two other goddesses. I wrote it that way just to make it clear. It's Parvati. Next slide, Samadhi. There are three major goddesses. There are hundreds of others. The Tridevi, the threefold goddess. Parvati, also called Uma, also called Gari. Some of you know the actress Uma Thurman. And she is the goddess of motherhood and nourishment, power, harmony, devotion. And she is a Devi in her complete form. Lakshmi is also a Devi in her complete form. And Saraswati is also a Devi in her complete form, but the three also form the Trivedi. It's a lot like the Roman Catholic theology of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but in this case, the three goddesses. Now, I'd like to talk more about the three goddesses, and maybe in the future, if I'm invited again, I'll give a whole lecture on the three goddesses. But it's definitely worthwhile looking up Parvati, Lakshmi, Saraswati, and the general Sanskrit word Devi. In Bali, they often refer to Saraswati as Devi, and in the rice fields in the Sawa, they often have a little Saraswati Devi goddess figure to bless the rice, to make sure they have a good rice harvest. Samadhi. So the goal of the kind of yoga that we like to do, the asanas and the pranayamas, that is to say the stretches and the breathing, could be considered in terms of a heavy-duty definition of samadhi, but it can also be considered in terms of a householder notion of samadhi. Now, I was looking for a good photograph or slide for the heavy-duty definition of samadhi, and with some hesitation, I settled on this one. It shows a glass, and the liquid in the glass is probably wine. But I like what is said there. Samadhi is the realization that the glass is never just half full or half empty, because the point is that the glass can be refilled. So when you're feeling down, when you're feeling depressed, when you're unhappy, half an hour of yogic breathing, a half an hour of just lying on the ground in death pose will refill your glass. And that is the essence of this heavy duty, a philosophical concept, metaphysical concept, which there are 400-page books written on this heavy duty concept of samadhi. But there's also samadhi at the level of the householder yoga that is practiced by Lalit and many other people. I love this picture of this couple. This is them in their prosperous years. Some of you may know the sequence of pictures because it shows what happens to this couple. But this is them at the height of their happiness in their beautiful garden, all those flowers. And that represents a kind of samadhi, a realization, an appreciation, even if it's only 5 minutes, even if it's only 1 minute, a full appreciation of a flower, of a tree, of the wind, of the beach, of the ocean. There's also this kind of basic samadhi, very simple, basic samadhi. And the sevenfold path to the 8th point of Patanjali's eightfold yoga, Ashtanga yoga, is to reach, at the very least, hopefully after much time, much effort, a kind of householder samadhi, an appreciation of the everyday, pausing to breathe for 30 seconds rather than rushing. And I've explained this at the last lecture. It's happened to me this morning. This happened to me yesterday. You're in the middle of something, you feel tense, you feel upset. And if you just pause for 30 seconds, for 1 minute, and stand straight or hold your head up high and take a deep breath, you will reach householder samadhi. Maybe not the kind of samadhi that 30 years of solitary meditation in the Himalayas will do, but it's there. It's the essence, the kernel of it is there. Samadhi. So I've referred several times to Patanjali's eightfold path called Ashtanga Marga. Marga means path, Ashtanga means 8. Some of you know this and some of you don't know this. So the first 7 steps prepare you. Now, I kind of had to laugh at this. You may recognize that the person who painted the sign accidentally did not spell school correctly. Nevertheless, the sign is there, and if you're driving a car, you can quickly recognize that you should slow down because there's this sure. It's kind of a cool sign. But the 8th step is really what Patanjali is talking about. You have all of the preparation of the first 7 steps, including the 2 aspects of the first step that I explained last time, are all preparing you for the 8th step. And the 8th step is a kind of getting to the point. And the point is samadhi. Now, it may be householder samadhi, or again, you could spend a lifetime meditating, fasting, being a monk, being a nun, and reaching the higher levels. And there are Sanskrit words explaining basic samadhi and higher level samadhi, but I won't burden you with those right now. Samadhi. So yoga is being defined here as a discipline. And in the first instance, it is a discipline of body and breath. The Sanskrit word yoga is a root word for the English word yoke. We yoke ourselves to the quest for a fully logical way of pursuing metaphysical truth, Sat, as a true being, as a human being who fulfills at least a small portion of our capacity to be fully human. Now, to maintain that kind of discipline requires the ability to breathe deeply. A lot of people say when they first start yoga, well, I know how to breathe. And then after 2 or 3 months, they say, well, I'm still learning how to breathe. So they have to breathe deeply. Breathing deeply is not easy. It also requires an ability to be at ease in our physical bodies. That's not easy either. Most of us are tense most of the time, particularly if we're working full time, particularly if we're raising a family, particularly if we are unemployed or fully employed. Both are kind of difficult. To be fully employed is difficult. To be unemployed is difficult. So to be at ease in our physical bodies is not a simple thing. To breathe is not simple. To be at ease is not simple. Those are the roots of how to yoke yourself to the pursuit of truth. Samadhi. Now, the Greek word psyche refers to the human self, including the mind. And of course, many know that there's a debate whether the mind even exists. It's an ontological concept. We assume that the brain is not all there is, and that it is logical to also speak of a mind. But it's a metaphysical concept, mind, and many behaviorist psychologists deny that we can have a scientific understanding of mind. The discipline of psyche logic is called psychology. It's a Greek word, the logic of the psyche. Mind logic. You could call the whole discipline of psychology mind logic. Yoga is a mind logic. It is the logic of the psyche. It's the logic of the brain, but it's also a logic of the mind. And then we have the problem of the dualism of brain and mind. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think that we can reconcile the two. I don't think they have to be seen as separate, but many philosophers and theologians have seen them as separate, and it's created whole schools of thought. Nevertheless, I believe in yoga, we can combine the notion of brain, which is scientific, and the notion of mind, which is metaphysical. Samadhi. In pursuing this and in reading a couple of books, I was actually surprised to learn that in some ways, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which many people know about, can be seen as kind of an echo or similarity to the whole concept of Patanjali's yoga, the Eightfold Path. In this case, we have 5 categories, but the self-actualization that Maslow is talking about is very similar to Samadhi, everyday life householder Samadhi anyway. And without going into all the details of the physiological, the safety, the love and belonging and esteem and self-actualization levels of Maslow, I recommend to anyone hearing this who would like to look it up, to look up Maslow, to read his books, and to see the strengths of his ideas, and also the clear fact that he himself did not know anything, or at least not much, about Indic civilization, Samkhya philosophy, the practice of yoga, but he got there through a Judeo-Christian path. He himself had a Jewish background, and he was an atheist, but I think his training as a young Jewish boy may very well have helped him to understand that life is not all about meeting our physiological and safety needs. There's also a need for love, there's a need for belonging, there's a need for esteem. And if all things are possible, even for very poor people, there's a need for self-actualization. I won't go into all the details of that, but one problem in the early version of Maslow's hierarchy was he felt you had to go through step 1 and then step 2 and then step 3 and then step 4, and only then could you reach step 5. Later on, he acknowledged that even if you didn't meet all the other 4 needs, you could still maybe be striving for self-actualization. And of course, the exemplar of that are yogis who are wandering ascetics, fakirs in India, who have no safety or belonging or esteem, and don't meet physiological needs of the kind that most people in Canada and the United States would think are necessary. They don't have hot running water, they don't have bathrooms, but they still strive for self-actualization. So there's a strength and a weakness in Maslow's hierarchy, but it does connect us with contemporary humanistic psychology, not behaviorist psychology, but humanistic psychology. Samadhi. So this talk is about yoga and the psyche. Buddhist Hindu thinking often involves speculation about psychology. Indeed, some argue that Buddhism is at root mostly about our psyches. The Vedas and the Upanishads precede what we call Buddhism. And then the dialogue for 300-400 years between what we now call Buddhists and what we now call Hindus created modern Hinduism. A dialogue between Buddhist and Upanishadic thinkers led to what is now popularly called Hinduism in the English language. The word is English. It's not an Indic word, but it refers to the early civilization, and it is a attempt to talk about Sanatana Dharma. I mentioned that last time. Hinduism. It's a label. There's no one thing called Hinduism. It's a label. There's no one thing called Christianity. It's a label. There's no one thing called Judaism. It's just a label. There's no one thing called Buddhism. These are labels that we apply in popular discourse. But as soon as you get into the scholarly understanding of it, it's like the 1,344 uses of the word Samadhi. So Siddhartha Gautama was a clear thinker because he experienced Buddha. That's, again, a word that comes from Samkhya philosophy. He could get to the point. Now, this is a figure of a 9-headed Buddha, and it causes confusion because if you have 9 heads, can you ever get to the point? Well, the whole purpose of the 9 heads is to show that he saw everywhere and yet was able to find Buddha. He was able to get to the point. So if you are practicing yoga, at least at the level of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Ashtanga in the traditional sense, not in the trademark sense, the point is Samadhi. Even if you are seeing everything and you're constantly multitasking, you still want to get to the point. The point is Samadhi. Now, the psyche exists socially. So far, I've talked about something called psychology, but of course, there's a field of study called social psychology. There's a kind of social psychology in industrialized countries that is based on the field of psychology as an academic discipline. But there's also an academic field of social psychology that is a subset of the field of sociology. So you may be wondering, why is this guy who's a PhD in sociology talking about psychology? In essence, I'm talking about social psychology. And in essence, the yoga philosophy is not just about the individual, but about community, the Sangha, the community, people together. And our community is 7.4 billion human beings. From a yogic perspective, from a Gandhian perspective, from a Samkhya perspective, all human beings are part of the social. Yoga speculation about the psyche often involves social psychology, not just individualistic psychology, not just the person as an atomistic individual divorced from all other human beings. As a footnote, it's also a difficulty in some versions of neoclassical economics. Samadhi. So we're talking here about Psyche Logic, psychology, and science. The Latin word for science is scientia. The Sanskrit word for science is Veda. Indic civilization and yogic philosophy are important here, as well as modern sciences in India. So not every guy who looks like a yogi is a non-scientific thinker. Some are not. Some are very scientifically well-grounded. I mentioned an early, very important scientist from India, from Bengal. Abrahamic civilizations, and that's Judaism, Christianity, but also Islam. Abrahamic civilizations and modern sciences are taught in North America. So Abrahamic civilization can be thought of as only religious, but if you really look at it carefully in terms of the history of scientia in the general sense, modern sciences are to some extent based on Abrahamic civilization. That does not mean that modern sciences are not also based on Indic civilization. Many of you know that the concept of zero, which is often called an Arabic concept, Arabic numerals, are actually Indic numerals. They came from what we now call India and Pakistan to the Middle East and, of course, Saudi Arabia. So Indic civilization and Abrahamic civilization can lead to modern sciences as taught in North America, and also to theology, which has been ignored very much in North America. The fellow on the right is well known, and I've really been enjoying young Sheldon with my wife. If in the Q&A anybody wants to ask me about young Sheldon, I'd be really happy. Samkhya. So stretching exercises limber the physical body. When we do asanas, we're essentially trying to allow our bodies to become healthy. A healthy body is an aspect of well-being. We need to be well in order to do meditation. If you're not well, it's very hard to meditate for very long. I mean, even for 3 minutes, much less 3 hours. So we need to be well in order to do meditation. If we're not well, or even really sick, our meditation often suffers. Now, there are those who are so adept at yoga and meditation that even when they're sick, they can use meditation to recover from their sickness. I know that too. But in general, on average, people like me, who are not really adept and who get older and therefore don't practice often enough, which is, of course, a vicious circle, we suffer in our meditation if we don't have a sense of well-being in our body. A healthy body creates well-being. Well-being helps us to do meditation. Samadhi. Now, the colonial contact with South Asia led to broader horizons. It led to other things that we can criticize, but it also led to a broader understanding. For example, I love the green Tara. I've done Tibetan Buddhist meditation, and I have 5 Tibetan images similar to the one in the picture. On the left-hand side, you'll see where the Dutch first had colonies in India and Sri Lanka. That's often ignored. The Dutch and the English, of course, fought in the 17th century, and then on the third major battle, the English won. Otherwise, of course, we'd be speaking Dutch now. So colonial contact and Oriental thinking, it doesn't lead to what Said called Orientalism only. It doesn't only lead to a negative form of Orientalism. It also leads to a broader understanding than even many people in India had of Indic civilization in general, including, of course, Buddhism. I love this statue, and I've done a lot of meditation on this statue. Of course, you know the 10 Commandments, and we're not supposed to get caught up in icons, but I don't think it's iconic. I don't think it's a fallacy. We were taught in Tibetan Buddhism, it's not the image, it's your metaphysical understanding of the image that you are meditating on. It's not the object, it's the way the object evokes your meditative awareness. Samkhya. So breathing exercises allow us to think clearly. If we're short of breath, it's hard to think clearly. The pranayamas are not done simply for health reasons, although it does create better health. Deep breathing does contribute to health and relaxation, but a person who breathes deeply and is physically well is not yet finished either. So you can be a wonderful breather. You can do pranayamas really well. You can also do your asanas extremely well. It's been a hard lesson for me to understand that people who do beautiful asanas are not necessarily yoginis and yogis. They are people who are students of yoga. It's not how beautifully you do the asanas that determines whether you're a true yogin. Samkhya. Well-being is not limited to yoga, of course. There are many forms of exercise, and almost all forms of exercise are beneficial if they're done the right way. But what makes yogic stretching, asanas, and breathing, pranayamas, part of yoga writ large, is that they form a basis for awareness. Capital A, awareness. To be fully aware requires focused concentration. To be fully aware requires a focused concentration. By this time, I've been talking so long, you're probably checking your email or checking your smartphone. But to be yogically aware requires focused concentration. Samadhi. Focused concentration helps foster well-being. It's a virtuous circle. We stretch and breathe deeply, then we're able to focus on well-being. Once we feel well, we're also able to overcome our limitations, at least to some extent. We can even do that as householders and students. You don't have to become a nun or a monk and live in the Himalayas for 40 years to become somewhat adept. Before the 19th century, the idea of yoga practice almost always involved a stage of life that was after the householder stage. So when you reach the ripe old age of 40, then you left your household, perhaps, and you went out into the jungle, and then you died at 50. Or maybe you lived to the ripe old age of 50 as a householder, and then you would go and then you'd live till 60 or 70. But old age then was much younger than it would be now. For some, yoga involves giving up on being a householder altogether. So particularly people from the lower castes would sometimes give up even the idea of being a householder. And at the age of 12 or 14, they would become a yogin, that's yogi, or in some cases yogini. But the traditional Hindu concept is that you become more spiritual as you get older. Not always true, of course. Not even in India. Samadhi. Now, householder yoga is not easy to sustain, as all of you know. Anyone who's really tried, it's like learning to play the guitar or the piano. It's not easy to do it halfway well, or much less really well. The vicissitudes of everyday life in the household are often stressful. For many students, the activities involved in studying are stressful. I know this. I was a student. I'm still a student. It can be really stressful. Just studying can be stressful. Then having a family is stressful. Having children is stressful. Many university students experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, which leads to anxiety. If we get a job, then making a living is stressful as well. And it can be alienating. Of course, many social scientists know there's a huge literature on the concept of alienation, and we won't go into that at this time. But even just being alive can feel very alienating if you have to do things. Now, I thought when I got a pension and I was retired, I'd have all this time, but I still have to take out the garbage. I still have to wash the dishes. I still have to get my clothes clean. I still have to go to the doctor. I still have to go to the dentist. So even a retired person with a relatively okay income can still feel a lot of stress and anxiety. A young child can feel a lot of stress and anxiety. Imagine what it's like to be 3 years old or 5 years old. It's very anxious. You don't understand what's going on. Your parents may be bossing you around, maybe for good reasons. Samadhi. So I believe yoga can help us ride the wave. The practice of yogic deep breathing and stretching can help us to become mindful and experience a sense of well-being. In my own life, I face many forms of stress, as I alluded just now. I sometimes do not handle stress well. People who know me know that there are times when I get angry, or I say things that are not polite, or I don't pause to understand what I'm doing. However, at rare moments, I do, at least to a little bit of an extent, overcome this problem of stress through the deep breathing, through the asanas, through a sense of well-being, through a sense of self-esteem. Maslow would like the word self-esteem. So don't be too hard on yourself. Don't think you have to be a saint or a bodhisattva. If you can handle stress 10% of the time, if you can breathe into it and ride the wave 5% of the time, you're a lot better off than people who never do that, who hardly ever do that. There's a certain politician I won't mention who has never learned this. I don't want to get into politics right now. You can ask me a Q&A. I'm taking a deep breath, samadhi. I'm actually feeling less stressed at this moment. So I have to introduce you to Sam. Sam includes Samkhya, the philosophical theological viewpoint I've been talking about. Sam can also mean focused attention without allowing distractions to hinder one from being fully awake, being aware. Zen yoga, it's a woke yoga based on Samkhya. I've been toying with the idea of Sam yoga. Samkhya includes the idea of buddhi, as I've mentioned. Samadhi. Now, I've sometimes felt guilty that I don't do as many asanas as I would expect. I know my time is running out, but I just want to finish with this. These are two of the books that I've really drawn on. And Lalit and I have talked about this. John Ittner, I'm sorry, there's a typo. John Ittner's book, Lighting the Lamp of Wisdom, A Week Inside a Yoga Ashram, has a foreword by David Frawley. And some of you know Mircea Eliade. He's a controversial thinker, but his book, Yoga, Immortality, and Freedom is extremely good. Samadhi. So Sam, Samadhi, everyday life, short bits of Samadhi, lifelong lofty Samadhi. Samadhi light, I call it. This is for students and householders and ordinary people like you and me. For people like M.K. Gandhi and Thich Nhat Hanh, the lifelong lofty Samadhi comes closer. Samadhi for those who make it their life goal to accomplish the highest form of Zen Yoga or Sam Yoga, and who have reached some version of enlightenment. In Japanese, they call it Satori. Samadhi. So, what did Hans talk about today? If you can't remember, maybe what will come into your mind in a week is Sam. Maybe you'll meet somebody named Sam. Maybe you'll see the word Sam. So the key thing to put into your mind about this talk is the Sanskrit word samkhya, samadhi, sannyasin. Sometimes the M is pronounced like an N. Samadhi. Thank you. I'm on Facebook. I'm at academia.edu. I have an email. I'm on Twitter. I'd love to have communication from anyone who wants to communicate. Thank you, Lalit.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can just close our eyes for a moment. And then just reflect, just for a moment. So we are going inside, and then from inside, we are going to come into this world and maybe see the picture differently. You can open our eyes, and if you have any questions, Dr. Hans Bakker, beautiful talk here, and he has left so many things open here. So feel free to ask any questions, please. Okay, anybody else have any question? Maybe I can answer that.
Well, I don't have a question. I just have a comment on the presentation.
Sure. Yeah.
I really like the slide where he compared the stretches to the other exercises, because this helps us focus and improves concentration and makes us feel the body and things like that. So I thought that was a new way of, see, even though we know these things, sometimes there is a niche that happens when we get the idea. So to me, that was the point.
Wonderful. I see that Dr. Shiv Talwar, you have a comment or a question? Hello? Dr. Shiv?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a comment to maybe a response to your question. What I understood was what you need to for you to go for samadhi, to work for samadhi. In my opinion, I think yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama, those four preliminaries condition your mind to have a purpose in life. And once you have a purpose in life, whatever that purpose may be, then your mind is conditioned for samadhi. That is a thought.
Yeah. And samadhi, there is another meaning of samadhi too. It comes from samadhan. Some is also totality, So it's a state where, you have found answers to all your questions, or you have kind of mastered all the problems that are there around, So it's also called total resolve, that you have resolved, and all the problems or issues or questions that have been solved, So that's one of the reasons some people do want to go there, if, you have reached, your awareness and, you're easy in life, your mind is at the right place, so there's a next step that you can take,
Yeah, I tend to think that you have to have a question to find answers. And if you don't ask yourself a big question, then your chance of samadhi are minimal. You are happy living a life of sense gratification. And, you're, as you say, easy life. And if you're used to easy life and you don't want to give it up for any purpose, which is higher and profound, then the chances of your wanting to focus attention to get to samadhi, to find the answers, are non-existent. And then they're imaginary.
Yes. Anybody else?
I didn't really understand the question. Is it necessary to have the question before you can do yoga?
I believe if you do the preliminaries of yoga, yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama, then you do have questions. Otherwise, you're happy leading a nice and easy, comfortable life. And if you have a big question that you want answered, then only you will go into samadhi.
Well, do we have to have big questions or can they be little questions?
Well, profound, whether they're little or big, it doesn't matter.
Don't you
Something
think
that you have to
almost-
search for, something that you have to search for.
I believe every human being has questions.
Well, it depends upon what kind of questions.
Well, that's the distinction there. Big questions,
Yeah,
little
that-
questions,
yeah.
profound questions.
To lead a purposeful life, then you can't just be happy in sense gratification and easy, comfortable life.
I think I agree with you. I just don't understand.
Well, it's the language, I
I'm
guess.
not sure we understand what we're talking about when we say this. Are you trying to imply that there are people who do yoga and they're just contented to do the asanas and their pranayama?
No, I'm not implying that. What I'm implying is that people who are doing the preliminaries, the first 4 preliminaries of yoga, they will develop a purpose in life. They will have answers that
Yeah,
they will seek solutions
I agree
for.
with that. I totally agree with that. Maybe I misunderstood your original.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, no, I totally agree with that. Yes.
I think in this series, we're talking about yoga for you and the planet, So one of the things, as I understand, yoga is, you had a definition of yoga is about yoking, So yoking with what, We want to yoke with the whole, as you said, 7.4 billion, but also yoke with anything else around, with the nature, for example, So it has some practical implications, not just the samadhi, but once we connect with everything that is around us, trees and nature and anything else, all the human beings, then it has a practical practical purpose of that, then, we are aware of any little thing that we do, or actions, and you see that what's happening in our world, what's happening, for example, with the climate, So yoga becomes very practical in that sense, that we are connected, all we are connected, we are interdependent, we affect each other, That awareness is also, we talk about social psychology, but you can go bigger than that, you can take it as a cosmos level or a universal level, So this is one other thing that I think has some practical implications with, what we can do to add something beautiful to the world that we live in, or help with the climate crisis, Does that make sense? Anybody?
So hello.
Hello, Aditaji, how are you?
Hello Lalit Bhai, hello Hans.
Hello.
Greetings to both of you and to all friends from
Hello, Ananta.
Pondicherry. Hello to all friends from Pondicherry. It's a joy to listen to you, Hans. Very deep. So, inspired by your deep exploration, I was just thinking about that Samadhi also as an everyday experience in the sense of that Samadhi becomes a part of our life. So it is in that sense, how do we cultivate Samadhi as a part of our life? Then Samadhi, when we begin with depth psychology, Samadhi is a depth experience. And that depth experience is the vertical dimension, both height and depth, also connects to the horizontal. So my query is that Samadhi is an unfolding of the horizontal and the vertical. Then beginning your reference to real, imaginary, and the symbolic. So if you could elaborate a bit, that the Samadhi both in terms of real, imaginary, and the symbolic. But the symbolic also in the multiple sense. Symbolic in the way that Lacan uses, but also symbolic as also in other ways. For example, symbolic as the realization of potential or something as a star that can guide our action.
Thank you. Anshi or anybody?
I don't know if there's a question there, Anantaji, but I basically agree with you. I hope nothing that I said is contrary to what you're trying to say.
Yes, and I request a little bit more elaboration from you, about Samadhi, for example, as an everyday experience, from your own journey with Samadhi. And if you could kindly elaborate a little more on that, and if you can kindly elaborate the symbolic dimension of the Samadhi, the real and the imaginary, if you can kindly give us a few examples, that would be very enriching for us.
In the back of my mind, when I talk about this, it doesn't have to be like a evangelical Christian total, complete conversion experience. You don't have to suddenly know Samadhi and then you are totally converted for the rest of your life in the way in which some evangelicals, particularly non-denominational evangelicals, talk about, getting the Holy Spirit and so forth. So you get a little taste of it. Doesn't mean you immediately become a convert or that you're totally, completely adept or you're a true yogi in the highest sense. It means that you are getting a sense of it. You're getting a feeling for it. And as limited as I am, I still feel that I have had a taste for it. And in that sense, I agree with you that once you've had a taste for it, you can find it again. You may lose it for a while, but Lalit has helped me to find it again.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Anantaji. I'm so pleased that you joined. Thank you.
Very happy to see you, Anantaji. So we have a couple of minutes and you can take one more question or comment. So I think if you don't have any question, I'll just like to thank.
There's a question in the chat room, Lalit. I'd like to answer it. May I?
Sure.
You asked, what is the effect of contentment? Was that the question I didn't hear earlier?
Yes. Yeah. Contentment or, aparigraha, not hoarding, renunciation, for example. Do they have a role and how much role they have?
Yes, well, I believe if you're more aware and you have a sense of well-being, you're more likely to be contented, at least for a while. And if you realize that nothing in terms of material wealth or fame or experience is going to give you full and complete and utter satisfaction, then the breathing and the exercising and the stretching and the inquiry of jnana yoga and so forth, this gives you more contentment than being rich. I saw a wonderful documentary on a very, very rich man, and he bought many statues in Europe and he had a beautiful museum, but he was never content. So if you're a multimillionaire and you have a beautiful yacht, but you can't appreciate your body or you can't talk to people and you're so egotistical and narcissistic that you're totally caught up in yourself all the time, well, then contentment escapes you, it eludes you, you'll never get there. Whereas a person who has some understanding of this, and I think Shiv Talwar has, and I know Anantagiri has, and I'm sure many of the people listening do have this already, if you have some sense of these things that I'm trying to, in my very limited way, point to, it's more important than extreme wealth. Now, I do agree with the concept of basic needs. I mean, everyone needs potable water. Everyone needs a roof over their heads, more or less. We need some kinds of clothes. And I know a lot of people don't have those things in the world, refugee camps and poor people in North America and so forth, indigenous people who are suffering because of lack of water. But if you have basic needs, then making $1 million doesn't necessarily solve the problem of contentment, to put it in the simplest possible terms.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we are going to say bye for now. And this series, I want to share that this series is going to go until September. And we are planning to bring more speakers. One of them is, the next speaker is going to be from the UK, Diana O'Reilly. And one of other speaker is Dr. Satbir Singh Khalsa. He's from Harvard School, Harvard University there. So please stay tuned and we will be in touch with you again. We have a website that you can go there and check, what is the next speaker is going to be. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody very, very much.
Thank you, Lalit. Thank you everyone for listening.
Yes.
This opportunity. Very, very wonderful for me. Thank you.
And we will see you again. Everybody, please do come. Thank you.
Namaste. Tot ziens.